Welcome everybody back to the Spinner Rack. Today I'm here with my boy, Petey.
He doesn't even remember who I am. It's one person. It's one person. Petey. I remember now.
Hey, you know what? Between him and Calloway switching off, it's hard to figure out who's on my right and who's on my left. But today's Petey's day. He's finally come back to the crew. Today we're going to be discussing Judas Contract. Yes.
Why are we discussing the Judas Contract?
Because it's one of the most seminal stories in the Titan.
That's not why you said we were doing it.
All right. We're doing it because it's coming up on Titan Season 2 on DC Universe, okay? So this is, of course, we're going to change some things up. We wanted to give you some of the basic information about this story, which we think is one of the best ones that Marv Wolfman and George Perez put out. So here, we're going to start it off. I'm going to ask Petey, can you give us a little background on the story that you know of?
Well into the success of the new Teen Titans, the relaunch of DC's Teen Heroes.
Under Marv Wolfman and George Perez?
Right, yes. And with the editor, Lin Wen, who gave up the editorship so that Marv would become writer-editor of the Titans, and then he made George Perez their co-editor. So they shared in everything. They like many creators, like the way Stan Lee and Jack Kirby worked. They had conferences. They had conference over the story. Perez would draw up the stuff that they hashed out, and then at some point they became a huge success. They had stuff like I guess at the same time of this thing, they had the Trigon saga, but they had two sagas going on at the same time.
So the Trigon saga was one of the first story arcs that they had in the Teen Titans. That wasn't the first one.
They had the Black Star. Now the Titans was very much a professional success, whereas the X-Men was sort of like X-Men 137 is a big issue, but it doesn't hit the numbers. Now Titans would do double-sized issues on the annuals. The annuals would be the big climax to everything. So the first annual has the big Dark Star, Black Star versus Starfire. So there was this big storyline that ended in the annual. So it also trained the fans to be looking for the annuals. The annuals usually be like a random story that was, double-sized, but it'd be like sort of a random fun story. So then the second one had the culmination of everything that was going on with Adrian Chase, which introduced the new, the Vigilante. He introduced the new Vigilante.
I like that comic.
So then the next thing they did was a culmination of a character who was known as Terra, who had joined the youngest member of the team. She might have been the most powerful, but she was actually on the side of the bad guys. So this was a slow thing, and as far as being a fan, the Titans was very much a feel-good group. They did have a lot of day-in-the-life stories, but then they had a lot of things where they would go to the darkness. So since this was more like, not exactly, it was close to the X-Men because you could see the dynamic of the characters. The characters are sort of have the Colossus. You don't really have a Wolverine, but Garfield, Logan, he can change into a wolf. So there's so many things that you could connect to the X-Men, even like Robin being more sort of rigid like Cyclops and Storm and Starfire. So you had these elements, but it was very much a feel-good thing where you could trust Marv Wolfman and George Perez. But in this storyline, so you really didn't know if Terra was going to go bad. In the Judas Contract, which is possibly one of the best titles ever, and it's a very good way of taking something that's classic and then putting it with something to make a new title that's a very strong title. So once you hear like, oh, this is like, you can't wait to hear like they labeled this thing, so it's branded nicely. It's I think it's issue, like, was it 41 to 43, and then it ends in the Tales of the Titans, maybe 42 to 44, but it ends in the Titans annual, the Tales of the Titans 4, and it's a really big, well, maybe it was the Tales Titan 3, but it's a really big storyline that ends there, and we find out the actual fate of Terra. Robin actually gets a new outfit. We see he becomes Nightwing. He loses a Robin attire a few issues earlier. I think it's 39, but then he gets his new identity. And now people are kind of like, let's get to the Titans now. Let's get to it. Since we're that close to it, we give enough overview. Let's talk about the Judas Contract.
Before we get to the contract. I know, but listen. One of the things we need to discuss is, how did Marv Wolfman and George Perez get into this thing? I mean, we've actually interviewed Marv Wolfman. We've done some work with, I think we've touched base with, if you've seen some old videos, probably George Perez. But the key thing is that, when they came into the Titans, this was a series that originally existed previously, right?
Yes.
Right, and so this was a revamp. And the Titans were basically the sidekicks? We had this discussion with Cal. He's like, no, they're not really sidekicks, but in essence, they were the sidekicks.
No, the Titans the DC was the home of the child. Well, no, actually, Marvel started the Child Heroes and the Young Allies, but then Jack Kirby and Joe Simon, they went to DC, and then they created the Boy Commandos. They created the Newsboy Legion, and then from that point, DC characters already had sidekicks. So you had Batman and Robin. You had then the later heroes, so like the Flash had Kid Flash. Then they started I guess it was, I'm not sure the actual year. I guess it was Wonder Woman didn't actually have a sidekick. She had alternate versions of herself.
Wonder Girl?
Wonder Girl originally was a younger
version, right?
Of Wonder Woman.
Okay.
And then there was a baby, a Wonder Baby. They were all the same character. So when they introduced her in when they put her with the Titans, she was first that, but then they decided, you know what, she's going to be a different character that's actually a sidekick to Wonder Woman. So that's why her history got kind of pushed out of whack, and that's one of the things that Marv Wolfman and George Perez kind of fixed. So it was a title that I don't know was that big when it started, but Marv Wolfman actually worked on that. One of his stories was, I think it was about. He had one story that was out, but it was heavily edited. So there was a little controversy. I think Neil Adams drew it. So they did a couple issues. The run wasn't that long, but they had a little bit of following. So then Marv Wolfman, with a bunch of other Marvel people who were writer-editors, they were able to go to DC and stay writer-editors, like the way Stan Lee was, where they would basically, edit their own stuff. They really... obviously the higher-ups would be approve or not approve stuff, but they came over to Marvel, established themselves in Marvel, being editor-in-chief. Like, who is it? Roy Thomas became a writer-editor. Lean Wayne, I think Gary Conway, and then, of course, Marv Wolfman. They all left the editorship and became writer-editors at DC. So their big idea when he got to DC, was to do a new Titans book. Now, George Perez had just gotten the Avengers, and he got the JLA. The JLA was the book he really wanted. He had done the Avengers before, but then they were like, help us design these Titans and maybe do the first couple issues. So he designed the Titans. He was adding stuff to what Lane and Marv had already done. They had some ideas. He was putting together more, even better designs and adding more stuff to the characters. And then while he started to draw those characters, he really got into it, and he kind of pushed aside the other work and stuck strictly on the Titans. And the Titans took off. It was a big hit, and the storyline, the stories, even though it's similar to the X-Men, it was very much the same way, inspired by the same thing. They're both inspired by the Stan Lee and Jack Kirby's Fantastic Four. So you get multi-genre storylines. You get space stories. You get down to earth stories. You could any sort of genre. Like they have Raven has sort of the mystical powers. So you have mystical stories. Every character could lead into some other genre. So basically, they were rolling with that same format that Stan and Jack created, but they added a lot of they modernized it the same way Marvel was modernizing a lot of the Kirby concepts and Stan Lee concepts. So the book was just rolling, and DC had its other hit, which is Legion of Superheroes, but this was even bigger than that. So Legion was always a long-standing hit, but the Titans had really hit hard. So at some point, they had, I think in issue 2, they fight the Ravager and the Terminator, Deathstroke the Terminator. And the Terminator is a long-standing villain who has been showing up in many of the DC universes on television.
Now he's like an anti-hero in their comics and stuff like that. He's a fan favorite also.
He shows up he's in Arrow, who's in the Justice League.
Yeah, he has his own comic now.
In the first Titans cartoon, he shows up all the time. And he's, almost since Deadpool is based on so much, a lot of the idea that Deadpool walks around with swords is from Deathstroke. So, so it's a lot of when Marvel Marvel and DC did the X-Men Teen Titans, Deathstroke shows up as a mercenary for Darkseid. So he's a very popular character. He's a mercenary, not really the Punisher, but he's more like a mercenary with the Taskmaster. Perez liked the Taskmaster, so it's sort of like DC's Taskmaster, but a little cooler because he has the one eye. His one eye is covered, so it's so much cool stuff. So hopefully I have to have a picture up for that. So basically, at this point, they're rolling. Everything's a success. They relaunched another a Baxter edition, which was just for the direct market.
What's the Baxter edition?
I just said they released a separate series that was going to be only released in the comic book stores. So they had an actual new #1, new Teen Titans. They made the regular title, The Tales of the Teen Titans. And this was an even bigger success. It started with new #1, and I think Perez left after issue 6 of the Baxter edition, and we did maybe up to 50 of the Tales of the Teen Titans. I would only say one thing, which was the mistake that they made in the 2 titles, because with the 2 titles, the plan was that the Tales of the Teen Titans would turn into reprints, but their plan was to reprint stories that were in the Baxter edition when they should have reprinted stuff in the old issues. But DC is well, we don't want to hurt the bookstore, the back issue market.
Okay.
Whereas Marvel had no qualms, and when they did classic X-Men, they did all the stuff you couldn't get. X-Men '94, that's been reprinted a number of times, and it never takes down the price of the thing. So you have to remember, some of the things marketing-wise, trying to be too smart for the fans and help out different markets doesn't always work. But I think same with the Legion, the superheroes. They had Tales of the Legion, and they reprinted stuff from the Baxter series when they should have went back to all those classic stories that people talk about but never read. So I've given enough backstory. You guys, I'm not asking for it. Usually I ramble on, and he's been asking me to do this after all this time back. It's like after a prison bid, you come out and actually try to make you go out and work.
Okay, so let's get straight to it. Judas Contract. It's a very interesting story, but it also pushes the envelope on a lot of different fronts in terms of what the characters do. Was this a Comic Code comic?
Yes.
Even with the subject that they have there.
What subject they have?
The subject between Deathstroke and Terra.
The thing is that he's a villain. So they didn't actually show them how she's underage. And they have her, and she's walking around with underwear, and they clearly had some sort of sexual relationship. But he's a villain. So having a villain do something with an underage kid is still a villain.
Right, but that pushed the envelope. And
it didn't push the envelope because they didn't do anything.
Okay,
the thing
I'm
is
just
within
saying
the code.
It touched.
And the only thing different would be her walking around with a cigarette, and put her in clothes on her. So I can't. You have a villain. He's bad and she's bad. We can't say, well, he can't do that because that's too bad. That's a little further.
Okay.
He's still a bad guy.
So let's just get straight into the story.
Okay.
Judas Contract.
Judas Contract starts off when it finally happens. I think the first issue is a day in the life issue, but it's done through. It's not really. It's sort of hinted that it's done through Terra, but Terra has a spy camera in her contact lens. So she's taking pictures. So this is very voluptuous picture of Starfire, Coriander, that starts up the page. And it was interesting the way Marv scripted Terra, because she really sounded like a kid. And it really felt like it was a real girl, because she was calling Coriander Balloon Bod. So it was just like it's something that a woman would sort of just throw on another, as the sort of, like a negative, disparaging remark towards her. So that was one thing I remember, and you could see the connection between Robin and Coriander, but she's interacting with all of the Titans, and she's making these connections. She's talking with them, seeing with them at home. They're all opening up themselves to her. They know her, they let her know their secret identities. So then when they get to a point where she runs into Raven, Raven is like, I don't know about you. There's something I feel, and you've had a lot of darkness, and you're not opening up. And you see when she takes a picture of Raven, she's like, I'm taking you. You're the one that I'm gonna take. And then when you get to the last thing, we get a surprise because Tara has basically pushed away all of Garfield Logan's advances, and this time we have the magical moment. So when you read this book, even though it had the dark moment with Raven, there's always that light that's in with Marv and Marv and George, where they played it so light that, oh wow.
Young love.
Yep, young love. Finally, he's been there for her. But they had a fight, I think, earlier, and Tara tried to kill Garfield, changeling, but at the end they sort of make this connection. So they showed you that it was dark, and then they're really masters of illusion.
Yes.
Perez really sells you on stuff when you're not supposed to be concentrating. You're supposed to say, this chick almost killed the changeling. Raven's still not happy with her, and so then we get to the next issue.
And you see, before you do that, just so we know, her powers are Earth-based powers.
Her powers is it's Earth-based powers, but it's in sort of making like the stuff that happens in earthquakes, making it happen almost at exponential level.
Right.
So she can basically make lava come up from the ground. Stuff happens so powerful, like the fact that she's manipulating, but she's taking it and saying, all right, if you look at some of the pictures, the people on rocks in these pictures behind us, she's using the ground, and somehow these things have their own gravitational pull where they can affect gravity. So that's always interesting to me. I didn't really, until I said it just now, I didn't really know how it worked, but I'm guessing that's how it would have to work. That has to sort of, when you're using the Earth, it has some connection to gravity. So somehow the gravitational forces are still connected with her power. So I mean, it's not to say it is a leap, because now when I think about it, that is what they were going for. He did that same thing with Terrax, which is in the Fantastic Four, and John Byrne joked that Terrax, who was a Herald of Galactus, had a sex change and became Terra. So.
Interesting, but it's very interesting also that when we meet up with
Terra,
we find her that she's a young girl. She's trying to find a way. You
going with the accent on it, Terra? When it's like Terra, like Earth Terra?
What did I say?
You said Terra.
That's a Terra.
It's Terra.
It's Terra.
Like Terra. You don't say Terra when you're talking about the Earth, right? It's Terra. Like terra firma?
Do I say Earth? I say Earth. I said Terra.
But you said Terra.
That's what I just said.
Okay, let's keep going. Just keep going.
And you wonder why he hasn't been on the show for a while. So Terra, I
feel like Professor Griff when he came back to Public Enemy, and he's like, look, everyone's sleeping around with white girls.
So
it's Professor Griff.
So you
don't have to hold back the laughter. The whole point of me saying this stuff is for you to laugh. It's not for you not to laugh.
So what we find out, she comes in. We don't know what to think of Terra when she first comes into this environment. We don't know her.
But it's a happy-go-lucky book.
But it's a happy-go-lucky book. But I'm saying it throws you off, like you said. I'm trying to compliment what you said. I'm not dissing it. I'm not knocking it.
I'm not saying you are.
But her powers are not what we expect. We see her powers displayed, but everything is like PD's saying it's not an illusion, but you're not seeing the full Terra. So you're assuming a lot is going on, and that's what's happening from the perspective of Robin and Corey and all the others. They're looking at her and taking her as a young 13-year-old girl. Is she 13, something like that, and taking her as this is what she can do and what she can't. She has a little chip on her shoulder. She has a little attitude, but they're thinking it's just a little thing. Continue.
Well, there's one of the things that if you look at the books, especially the Marvel books at the time, they were doing sort of the new mythology. So you had Claremont, Byrne, Simonson, Miller. They were all doing these heavy storylines where people were dying. The heroes were being pushed to the brink. They looked like they weren't going to recover. They were going to have these long-standing injuries, or I think Thor had a Curse from Hela. All of these books are turning into what I would consider at the time like the new Greek gods, where they were all going through these challenges that they didn't seem like they were ever going to recover from, or this looming threat, like in the X-Men. There was always a looming threat that could destroy the X-Men, and it felt like they were going to lose. Whereas the Titans was a book of joy, even though they had so much dark stuff in there. Perez always gave you the light when it was a dark story. When they introduced the original Starfire, who's a Russian guy, and he is basically going to try to kill this woman in Russia, and the Titans come and they're fighting Starfire, and he's like, beating them up, and they're going back and forth, and this woman, she's actually has this contagion that the people it's like a plague, that she's getting other people sick, they're dying as she's going into while she's dying. So they get her to the hospital, they contain her, and he's like, I had to take care of this. And they're like, why would you be so hell-bent on it? She passes. He's like, well, that was my wife, and I was trying to give her mercy. So They did heavy stuff, but Perez made it so beautiful that you still thought it was going to be happy. And that's I'm leading to something here.
Yes.
So then we get to the second issue. Do you have anything else after the first?
No.
The second issue, the Judas Contract has been filled. The only person left is Robin, actually Dick Grayson. Dick Grayson is walking around, and he gets attacked by Slade Wilson.
Hold on, before you said it's been filled, explain how it's been filled.
I'm not saying, I'm leading to that.
Oh, okay, good.
Basically, what's the name? At this point, Robin gets attacked by Terminator, and Robin jumps out. He can't beat Terminator, Dick Grayson gets attacked by Terminator. He knows he can't beat him, so he actually gets punched away. But at this point, Terminator's a little more reckless, and Robin uses that to get out the house, and he basically runs out the street, and he runs down the block and escapes. Now, that's the whole thing. This is when comic books hit the reality that there's no way that that Robin is going to be able to beat the Terminator one-on-one. And he knows this, but he's smarter than the Terminator. Even though the Terminator is more technical, knows more things than Dick Grayson, Robin is still a better leader, a better right off the moment tactician, and he escapes. And at the same time, there are two people watching. And this woman and this kid who's not saying anything. Older woman, and she's like, Slade, which is Terminator's real name. Slade's getting sloppy in his old age. Look at him. He's like scaring people running down the street. So then they confront Robin, and they say, what's the name? They basically tell them that the contract has been fulfilled, and we can help you, but basically the Titans are finished. They've been captured. And he's not really with it. So this is a story where Dick Grayson is a detective, but at the same time, he's fighting what he's seeing, because he goes through it and he figures out how everybody got captured, how Cyborg, how Coriander gets a letter from Robin and she's all happy and it actually takes her out. Next thing you know, he goes through it, and then when he sees in the actual Titan in their island where the Titan's tower is, he sees Terra's rock formation. It's like, oh, how did he stop her? She must have put up a fight, but how would he deal with her powers? And then not realizing, he said, and then the woman shows up. They show up again, and they're at the Titan's tower. I guess they're at the Titan's tower, and they say to him, like, you're not looking at the scene. You, as a detective,
right.
Terra is the one. And he's like, really, he's not ready to believe it. Because actually it goes, and this is the thing, when you have symbolism and good symbolism, you don't have to say it. You have all this connection that Robin was 13-year-old with Batman. He's going to believe the best in this girl. Maybe she had some horror stuff, but if she's with the Titans, they can build her back up. The same with Robin went through this thing without saying it. You don't even have to say it.
Right. That's
the good part of the comics of that day, whereas now you would spend too much where he'd say, he would say something about it. So at this point, Dick Grayson kind of is on the left, figures that she's right, and she's saying basically she's connected to Slade because that's her ex-husband.
And she is with?
and she doesn't. They don't say it yet. It's coming up. They're saying that's coming up, but it leads to the next thing. Dick Grayson pops out. No, that goes into the next issue, right? But they go through Slade's history. I think they at that point, and is it in the? No, it's in the third part of this, because they don't get to the costume yet. They just go through what happened to the Titans, and that Robin's going to work with this woman and her son. So then the next issue, we go to Slade Wilson. Now that's the thing. I keep saying it because this goes to another connection to Deadpool, because Wade Wilson and Slade Wilson. So it's like so close. So then in issue 3, we have a cover where we have Robin in his new outfit, Nightwing, and then we have this other guy who's a George Perez character. He's totally a George Perez character because I think Marv Wolfman very much struggled with Jericho. Now Jericho also was a hint to a character that was very much a lot of controversy back in the days when Marv Wolfman did the Titans, but I don't know that story that well. So, but it's just they made a new Jericho, and Jericho is basically Slade Wilson's son. He's a mutant, obviously, and they go through his history.
Enhanced mutant.
Well, Slade, they go through his history. He's like one of the best in his classes, but his wife was someone that had been there before, and she was in within the Marines, or in the Marines or in the Army.
I know. I thought it was Special Forces.
Special Forces. So they're very much Special Forces, and she was actually, had more experience. So she had some things to show him, and he took to it and went beyond. And then he is almost killed, but at the same time, when he comes back, he heals really quicker than expected. And then she has kids. She's sort of staying home. He's totally like, she doesn't know he's a mercenary. He's going out on missions. And basically his drill sergeant gets captured, and Slade makes up a makeshift costume and goes out and saves him in this, wherever it could be, like Cambodia or something like that. He goes and finds his drill sergeant.
Right.
And there's a hint of the drill sergeant having this connection with Slade and all this stuff, because he's his servant. He's his Alfred. But why would this drill sergeant become
Anyway.
That sort of thing. So it's a lot of interesting stuff here, a lot of story here. And then you reveal that Jericho, Slade Wilson's son, he can't speak. And with this story where the kids get captured, and Slade believes himself so much when they have a knife to his son's throat, he thinks he's able to shoot him without his son getting injured. And he's like, I expected it. It's only a flesh wound. We can save him. And that's ultimately caused the breakup between the marriage, and that destroyed Jericho's vocal cords, so he can't speak, but he has the power to possess anybody. So he's able to go, he's able to look at someone, make eye contact, and then he can take over their body. That's his mutant power. Because obviously, it goes to the classic thing of a mutant, where Slade Wilson took all this stuff in his body, so then that would transfer into the kid, and then kid would be a mutant. The other son, who died and became the Ravager, where there's so much story.
Yeah, there's so much story.
So that's what I'm saying. Like, Slade Wilson can control 90% of his mind. Like, he has that kind of control. That's why his reflexes are so much better. And his son heard about the Terminator, but at the same time, he took the same process, but they pushed him, the Hive, they pushed him through 100. Now, the Hive, that's the one thing I haven't mentioned. Somewhere in the Titans series, the Hive put out this contract against the Titans, and they've been wanting the Titans for all this time, and this is what Slade has been after. Now, I don't remember the exact issue, but the whole looming threat of this Judas contract was really big. So at that point, they both got costumes. Robin, sees that Jericho's formidable. He can take over people. That'd be very useful. So they go out. They go down there. They're trying to free people, and they get captured. And then this leads to the big. No, this happens in the annual. In the annual, this happens. So Robin and Jericho go out. They go on this mission, and they in some, like, I think it's in sort of like this, like a lot of snow, some sort of mountain thing where the Hive is at. They go there, they break in, they actually get captured, and they obviously know who Dick Grayson is, but who's this other guy? And Slade is like, not this guy. Like, he is not in the contract.
Not part of it.
And he's like, he's with Dick Grayson. Like, he's a part of the contract. And they're like, He's like, now the Hive is even better because they're better villains. It's like, oh, now we got a bargaining chip. And the next thing you know, Slade, the Deathstroke looks up at Jericho and he's like, he said, oh, this is the pit. And Terra comes up, these are the pictures you were getting all mushy about. You actually love him. You think you might love him more than you love me. He's like, just shut up, Terra. Like, it's not that. And then he looks back, and then Jericho makes contact, and then with contact with the Terminator, it starts like blowing everything up, and this throws Terra out of whack, because she's like, oh, you didn't love me. So then at this point, the Titans, of course, break free. They're beating up the Hive. And Terra is just going crazy.
But the great revelation is that she is in a relationship. That's what throws everybody.
What do you mean?
Relationship with Wade.
That doesn't throw anyone off. Everyone knows that she's in a relationship.
Right, but when they find out that she betrayed the whole team.
They already know when they're captured, though.
When they know.
They don't have time to process. They don't have time to worry about that. They're captured.
Right.
They get broke. They get breaking. When they get broke free by this moment, at this point, they're just taking out the Hive.
Right.
Once the Hive is gone running, Deathstroke is in a place where he's caught, like he's about to fall. It's like, you gotta release me, or else I won't be able to save myself. So he releases his father, and then he said, oh, so he was controlling you. And he's like, he says to Jericho, he says to his son, he's like, Jericho, watch out. And he says by his real name. And Terra hits him with a rock. And it's like, oh, I knew you loved him. And that sends her even further off. So she's fighting the Terminator. And then the Titans come along where they're like, we'll just have to accept her as she is. And Garfield Logan is like, yes, she's a Titan. And she's like, shut up. Like, I never liked any of you. I hated you all. Showing that she was very unstable. And she was always unstable. And that's what, it's also a testament to mental illness where you think you're the nature or nurture where you could just sort of, give her a family and that would fix it. But
right.
Her wounds are very deep.
Very, very deep.
So she's just going crazy. They can't stop it whereas everyone's a mess and they're just like, we got to get out of here. There's nothing we can do to stop her short of killing her, and she's close to killing herself. So they escape. She actually makes the elements, the rock elements and stuff, really basically crush her on herself, and she dies. And this isn't their Dark Phoenix story, but this is close.
Very close. And
she dies. Garfield is a mess. The Titans are kind of, wishing they could have. But this is where you feel that everyone was going to get out, and they didn't give it to you.
Even Deathstroke.
And Deathstroke is just sad, and it's a powerful storyline. The Titans win. They have a loss. They have a casualty. They still see her and they make a mural for her and her tombstone, and they.
Well, they see her as a tragic consequence, but it depends on how you look at the story. There's different ways in terms of, you can see her as tragic, but you can also see, she was unstable, and her whole thing was, she wanted to be loved, and she wanted to be loved by Slade. And once she realized that he was sharing his love with others, or that he had someone else,
that's crazy.
You don't think that's correct?
No, I'm saying no, but she's like the idea that she has to forsake the kids because he's a mercenary when he's gonna have some connection. Like right. In most of the time, the parents of today are a little different than the parents. Now, parents from the past, but everyone knew about the I love you dads, right? Like you're in the lane of the I love you dads. My father might be the first generation, but there was a little detachment because fathers had struggled with playing with their kids and the kids not respecting them. So my father was definitely I love you dad, but at the same time he wanted to maintain the respect. And that's the line that fathers always go to. Now Slade is from the old school. So having some sort of connection to just saying, I don't want the Hive to have my son is a tough thing. It is going to be a line where it's like, you had to get rid of everything. He already lost one son. He almost had Jericho killed in thinking being too cocky.
Yeah.
So it's gonna, it's not that simple. It's not even going to, people say this like a three-dimensional aspect. It's just a basic thing that where it's not like movies where he wasn't ready to give up everything. He was just like, I just got to figure a way out. I got to figure a way to get my son out of this, and I'm not going to pull the gun out and break him free and break free the Titans, but I got to make a deal with these guys. He's a mercenary.
And so, I mean, that's where you start developing that classic anti-hero trope with him. And he's not just pure villain, like, let's say, someone like Trigon or Brother Blood, but where he's like, all right, if it's in his interest, he will make a deal and work with someone else.
Maybe.
I guess more like a Doctor Doom would be, you don't think so?
Because Doctor Doom basically, like, Doctor Doom would work with you, he works with villains, and then he tosses them to the dogs.
Right.
He doesn't develop friendships with anyone that he's, working with. Whereas Wade, I think showing him as a mercenary, he's fine working, taking money, and not turning on the person.
Mm-hmm.
Dr. Doom doesn't turn on people, but he basically say, you're of no use to me, and he'll kill you on the spot. You might decide not to, but most of the time he'll be like,
he's using you for an end, and that's basically what it is.
But I mean, as himself being royalty, everything is he's legitimizes himself as royalty. So it's no like, oh, the puppet master, like you're out of here. That sort of thing. It's just like that. So I think, but yeah, they didn't really figure he'd be that great of an anti-hero. He was still very much a villain. It wasn't until I think in the Baxter series where they have Garfield and Terminator, they talk. Like he meets him in prison or something like that, and they have this long talk. And then it isn't until late in the series, after Perez returns to the Titans, and then Tom Grummett takes over, that they get an editor, I think his name was Jonathan Peterson. He started to push Marv into, hey, why don't you use Deathstroke the Terminator? You got this popular character. You should have spun him off into something. So he's like, oh yeah, let's do some things. He's like, why can't Deathstroke be in the Titans? And then they brought him in there, and they started to push Marv to do stuff that was very much more exciting and more with the time. So, I mean, it was always a successful book, but at the same time, it was really jumping. But Marv, I don't think he's very happy how all the stuff ended with when he was under Jonathan Peterson's editorship. But it was an extremely exciting book at that period. So, yeah. I mean, it's a book that I read recently.
You wouldn't have figured out. You wouldn't have thought it was going to end the way it ended. From the beginning of it.
Well,
but like you said, they gave us they already set the stage of her personality.
Yes,
that's but the thing you overlook it.
Yes, that's the hardest thing as fans, is that most of the time people are still online very crabby about, okay, in Alpha Flight, like Vindicator died, or a Guardian died, or there are people that are upset that Jean Grey died, But it wasn't until you started to realize, oh, these stories, even if they don't, did they stay in character? Was she weak? That's the thing that was going on. Garfield's love for her being unstable. It wouldn't have felt true if she just had a moment where she was like, you know what? I trust the Titans. She had this really dark thing that was in her, and whether she was involved, or you could say it was Terminator's fault or not. But she wanted revenge, and ultimately the only thing that would get her, you can't do the thing what you do with like the Sandman. You can't just put her in jail and then she joins the team afterwards. She has to stay in jail forever. No, I attacked a superhero. They have power, so I don't go to jail. Like, no. That means...
But they were trying to help her. They would have helped her if they could have helped her.
In that annual, they're like...
But whereas in the Judas Contract, the whole point of the question is whether Deathstroke was just using her to get to the Titans to fulfill the contract, or whether he actually felt a connection with her. I don't think he felt the same connection. Yeah, no. This was just a tool that he was using. Yeah, and he realized it's a dangerous tool, because I think in some aspects of the comic book, he felt that I have to handle this with kid gloves, right? Because you see how jealous she got, and how quick, and her power, how quick it turns. And then we all remember, while he has enhanced abilities, he's not super powerful.
Mhm.
You know, and Terra's powers are practically unlimited. We
Yeah.
just never see the limit, and you see it as she descends into utter madness. How powerful she truly
Yeah.
was. You know, it was difficult for the other members of the team to contain her.
The other hard part is that DC had also introduced Geoforce,
Mm-hmm.
who had the same sort of outfit as Terra. So they said they were siblings. So the two storylines, her coming from the same area, Markova. What's that? Markov? I think that's what it is.
Markov,
Markov. Like the fact that they're from the same area, and then basically his sister becomes a bad guy, and she has all this bad stuff. It's kind of hard. They maybe should have not made them connected, even though it felt good when they had the Batman and the Outsiders meet the Teen Titans, and they had this connection. When she dies, it's like, and he's at the funeral, and it's like, she was kind of a bad guy, guys. It's kind of that's the only thing that didn't ring true.
It's still a sister, no matter how it rocks.
They don't know that she's a bad. The Titans are being nice, but she was kind of off a rocker. It's
So,
kind of weird.
Overall, one of your favorite stories of Marv Wolfman and
Yeah,
I think it's definitely one of my favorite stories. I mean, like I said, just the whole twist of how it turned out with her. I was like, whoa, could not believe it, even to this day.
I think,
but it was all foreshadowed.
Yeah, I think the other story on the when they finally did the Trigon story, the real big one, I think that one was their Death of Phoenix, but they hinted that Raven was still alive. So.
Right. But the Trigon one, we kind of knew what was going to happen.
No, we didn't.
I kind of felt I knew what was going to happen.
So what did you think was going to happen?
No, I'm saying the whole him coming out.
Yeah.
And I'm just saying, not the plot, the exact everything out. I'm just saying you kind of knew where it was leading to. Probably that's a better way to say it. But where this one, if you were reading the first story, I never would have thought that she was going to flip the way she did in
No, but I'm saying that's because of the light of you felt of the character. You felt you could trust Marv and Perez not to give you the stuff basically like in Yellow Jacket storyline where Hank Pym, abuses his wife, ends up in jail. Like it keeps getting worse and worse,
Right.
And that's the way Marvel stuff was. And this is not a negative. This is basically giving almost new mythology, where some of these things worked out, and like the death of Guardian, he didn't come back until he came back much later. But the aspect of where they were hitting, they were really trying to do stuff that was popular in the 60s. But they were giving it to us almost on a monthly basis because the popular stories from the past were the death of Franklin Storm, which was Johnny and Sue's parents and father, which you don't really think of them as someone who lost their father in such a dramatic way because he was also in prison, and soon after he gets out of prison, he dies heroically. And then you had Gwen Stacy. So one of these things where you find where you kind of torture the characters, which also sometimes feel like you're torturing the readers, bring out some of the best stuff in Marvel. So it's one of the things where you've had a feel good thing, so you felt like you can trust them, but at the same time they were hitting you in the stomach, and you were like, why would they do this? It's only supposed to happen in the X-Men. Only the X-Men they're going to get, the X-Men are all going to die, that sort of thing. And then you find them, they're doing that same storyline, but they did a lot of day in the life stories where they didn't was it Jim Shooter said, it's okay to do a day in the life story. It's the day that you find penicillin, like something really dramatic happens. Whereas the Titans did day in the life stories, but sometimes nothing happened.
Right, but it's to set the tone of the character. There is more than just nothing happening. You have the character gets developed, where we find out, this guy has a life. What's going on? How he's struggling with stuff outside of the Titans.
You can do that, but the thing is that you also have to. It's hard to understand that as a reader. We're going to come back next week because of Perez's art. So Perez is at a stage where he could do either pinups, people going to drink coffee, and people would love it. For, say, a Don Heck, who's doing a book, you'd be like, well, what's going to keep you in there if he's just throwing people at the table? I'm not if you're not much of a fan of his art, you're going to be like, wow, what are they trying to do here? But if you see Perez do it, you're like, wow, look at this. This is totally new. This is like he's challenging himself. So I think one of the things that I can't think of, I'm trying to think of an issue where it's sort of a Dullsville, and then you get to the dramatic moment and it's very dramatic. But I mean, a lot of times you've seen like Alpha Flight, some of the Fantastic Four stories. I think you go to a Fantastic Four story with Hero, where you have a little kid in school and he's a fan of the Torch, and not much happens until he decides he wants to become the Torch because he's so lost in it, and that's a powerful, heavy moment in this very mundane story. So that's one of the things that you have to remember, that you want to, and this is not say the Titans weren't doing that, but I'm saying the Titans, they were so close to the light that you couldn't see that they were doing the same heavy storylines. And then a lot of times they had some positive things, like the annual #1 ends at a positive. She beats her sister. The sister would always have an edge, even though Starfire was a better fighter. She'd have an edge because she was a lot darker. But at the same time, Starfire has her hair. So she's getting beat up. She's losing. She can't bring herself to kill her sister. That's what the edge that Blackfire has.
Right.
And then she uses her hair, and it's like, what are you doing? Like, she has it up in the air, and it's like she still had one little bit, and then it ends positively. The next annual with Adrian Chase, the vigilante, it ends with, it's not a happy ending, but there is a connection between Dick Grayson and Coriander where they finally sort of say, we're kind of together. So you say, well, Adrian Chase is lost now. He's not friends with Robin, but at least we got this. So the light is so bright with George Perez, mostly brought George Perez because of what he brings to the joy in the books, where you could read like even the Hulk stories where Hulk is his neck broken and all this stuff, and you're not thinking that the Hulk's gonna die. You're thinking that Perez will get us through because he's still in the same family as the Burns, the Millers, but he's just a little more joy in him, and a little more when he does it. He does everything with a joy. So it's like same like with his criticism. He can criticize artists the same way anyone else is, but when Perez does, it just sounds nicer.
So thank you very much for coming in with the Judas Contract
Yes.
and the background on Perez and Marv Wolfman and Teen Titans. If you like what we're doing, comment, give us a thumbs up.
No, give us a thumbs up in the first. You should have. I'm going to do like Choke No Joke. The point is, you got to hit that like button. Hit that like button. Show them that you're real. Sorry. I watch a lot of other stuff later.
Spin a rack out.